A 45-year-old man was spotted running naked in a city in upstate New York, but now investigators say he's linked to a horrific crime. On August 20th, 45-year-old Jeremy Kirch was taken into custody when he's found running naked in the city of Rome in upstate New York. But investigators would later tie him to a terrible discovery made earlier that morning. That morning, Kirch's girlfriend, Elizabeth Gerling, never showed up for her morning meeting. And after she didn't respond to phone calls, including calls from her son, her loved ones knew something was wrong, so they went to her home to check on her. And that's when the horrific discovery was made. The lifeless body of Elizabeth, who was found dead in her bed with her dogs on top of her. When investigators arrived on scene, they quickly determined Elizabeth's death was suspicious. Attention eyed toward Kirch, who was Elizabeth's boyfriend, as he was at her home the night before until earlier that morning. According to reports, there were several efforts made to find Kirch throughout the day. But by that evening, authorities found him as they confirmed the naked man spotted running around was Kirch. The medical examiner's office confirmed authorities' suspicions that her death was suspicious, as officials confirmed Elizabeth Gerling was killed by asphyxia due to strangulation. And officials say Kirch made some statements about his involvement in the crime. After he was questioned, Kirch was charged with second-degree murder. But would an earlier police report potentially offer more insight and new clues into Kirch's state of mind prior to Elizabeth's death? A day prior to the discovery of her body, an Oneida County Sheriff's deputy responded to a caller who reported a stranger was following them and acting bizarre. Officials say that stranger was Jeremy Kirch. The caller told deputies Kirch had followed him home and was trying to talk to him about Jesus before putting flowers on his front lawn. Kirch reportedly told the man that he was led here by God and was following a trail of American flags that led him to the house. The deputy stated in their report there was no criminal background on file for Kirch, and he didn't appear to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Kirch reportedly then offered that he was living with his girlfriend, Elizabeth Gerling. When the deputy contacted her, she told them that prior to that, Kirch was at a music festival in Delaware and had been acting weird since. She told authorities she was waiting for Kirch all evening and stated he was ghosting her calls and texts. She told deputies she believed Kirch's recent actions were a result of a traumatic brain injury he suffered from in 2020. While the brain injury was enough to explain Kirch's bizarre behavior, police at the time determined there was nothing more they could do but send him back to Gerling. But the following day from that incident, Gerling was found dead. Elizabeth Gerling's death sent shockwaves across the community. She was a beloved principal at Columbus Elementary School. In a statement published to the school district's website, Superintendent Dr. Christopher Spence wrote in part, quote, "Ms. Gerling was not just an exceptional educator and leader, but also a dear friend and colleague to many. Her passing will undoubtedly have a deep impact on our staff, students, and the entire Utica City School District community." And a GoFundMe post would shed more light into who Elizabeth Gerling was outside of her duties as principal. According to her sister-in-law who organized the GoFundMe, Elizabeth was known to loved ones as Beth or Liz. She was a beloved mother, daughter, sister, educator, friend, and ray of light to everyone around her. She was an educator for 25 years, and it allowed her magic and impact to be felt by thousands upon thousands of students. The post went on to state, for those who were blessed to have Beth in their life, you know her greatest achievement and absolute love of her life was her son Noah. While Beth's warmth and light were always present, it was never greater than when she was speaking of or in the presence of her pride and joy, Noah. There's a lot of moving parts in this case, and here to break this down even further is criminal defense attorney Danielle Jackson. Danielle, thanks for being here. This case is very tragic. A beloved elementary school principal killed in her home, allegedly at the hands of her boyfriend. What are your thoughts about this case?
This case is extremely sad. It does seem like this individual may have been having some mental health challenges based off of the way he appeared the day before, and then the day after, it seems like. And so to, learn that a beloved community member, his life is taken in such a tragic way, it's extremely sad.
And something that you just mentioned that did stick out to me was the earlier police report about Jeremy Kirch. He reportedly was following a stranger to his home. He told the man that he was led there by God. But Elizabeth Gerling herself stated that he was acting strange. He was ghosting her, but believed his behavior may have been due in part to his traumatic brain injury that happened years prior. Then on the evening of when Gerling was discovered dead, he was found wandering the streets naked. What are your thoughts about that, especially given the traumatic brain injury aspect that he is alleged to have suffered through?
Yes, unfortunately, I've heard of stories like this where a loved one is all of a sudden having some acute symptoms of something impacting them emotionally or mentally. And then this person is reaching out to them to try to get to see where they are, to make sure they're safe. And it seems like she was looking for him. At least I believe one of the reports said for hours trying to get in contact with him and believe that he may have needed some assistance. And so you have this report of him following the neighbor and then potentially running around naked the next day. Immediately, my brain is going to this person is having some acute mental health issues. And we're going to hopefully find out whether or not that led to this tragic death.
And just on the initial reporting, do you believe the traumatic brain injury could have played part in the murder? As far as we know, there weren't reports of domestic violence, but it seems as though something may have snapped in Kirch for him to have allegedly committed this crime. What are your thoughts?
It's always possible. We rely as defense attorneys on experts, a lot of psychologists, when we have cases like this and clients are acting oddly before and after an event is happening. And so, we do have some research with various traumatic brain injuries and the type of immediate aggression some of them can cause. So depending on exactly what was going on and why he felt the need to let people know in the streets that, Jesus is sending him out on this mission and, whatever else we may find, it may be something that has triggered this traumatic issue and then caused an aggression, which may have caused murder.
And strangulation is such a personal crime. Are you surprised Kirsch was only charged with second degree murder as opposed to first degree murder?
No, not in these cases. As you just mentioned, there were no reports of anything prior. It doesn't seem like there, at least for what we know now, right, any history of things. And so the reports as they've come in so far does not appear that this was a planned out premeditated murder. It may have been either a heat of the moment situation or a crime of opportunity. He had the opportunity to do it based off of their relationship and no one probably being at the house with him. And so I don't think so far what we've learned it have reached the level of first degree murder.
And talk to me a little bit about the extreme risk protection order that was filed against Kirsch after his arrest. Why would that be filed after an arrest?
So now the police department has a specific reason to make this application based off of what they've seen in this case. And I'm assuming what the early reports from that psych visit that they had him do right after he was found in the street. And so when they have that type of information, it makes it more likely than not that a judge will sign one because they now have information for a judge to use in an objective manner to say why this person should not be in possession of any firearms. The way I see it is that especially on cases that are involving an assault, let's say a simple assault, third degree assault in New York, you are still seeing some of these be filed, depending on what the family relationship is like. If there is knowledge that this person has access to a firearm for some reason, and so in this case, I think it made sense based off of the information they had at that time.
And given what we know now, as far as Kirsch running around the city of Rome naked, the events that happened prior to the murder, do you expect Kirsch's attorneys to later say he's not guilty by mental insanity? And do you think it could go that way?
It wouldn't be surprising if someone is suffering this acute of a mental health break, which it seems like he may have been doing, depending on what those early psych evaluations may have seen. As an attorney, we go through our own questioning of our clients to determine whether or not we believe this person is competent to stand trial. Just because they're not, right, doesn't mean that the case is over. We still have a process to go through various evaluations. The DA gets their ability also to what's called controvert those findings if they don't believe that this person really has a mental health disorder that will prevent them from standing trial. And then eventually, depending on what those early reports are going to say, if that's all we have at that moment as a defense, then I can see where a defense attorney will then go in to say that this person was so mentally incapacitated at that time that you'll get the plea by reason of mental defect.
So, from what we know so far, is that Jeremy Kirsch is going to be going through a mental health evaluation. Talk to me a little bit about when a defendant goes through something like that. What does that all entail as far as psych exams, psych reports? What does that all entail?
So, under the criminal procedure law, section 730, that allows for either the court or the defense attorney or prosecutor to ask the court for what's called a 730 exam. After a person is ordered to conduct or to be held for this exam, for Mr. Hirsch, he will be held in a local jail facility where this will take place. He then will have to have an evaluation where there are two psychologists who are asking him a series of questions. Not many of the questions are specific to the alleged crime that this person committed, but they are just going over to see, do you know who your attorney is? Do you know the role of your attorney? Do you know what court you're in? Do you know the basics of your charges? Do you know what the allegations are against you? And some other questions like that. And they are going to see what the answers are to those questions. Is this person able to speak coherently? Do it seem like they completely do not understand what's going on around them? They also sometimes will take medical records they may have from correctional health services. That's what we use in New York City. And then we'll also sometimes do smaller interviews of people who may have interacted with them in the last couple of, days. Usually it's a correction officer, nurse, or someone, if there's any other information that may be helpful. And then they both will write a report and come to the conclusion whether or not they believe the person is competent to stand trial at that time. Once those reports are done, a notice is sent to the court to let the court know that the results are in. The parties, meaning the defense attorney and the prosecutor, will both get a copy of that report, and then they will both decide whether or not they want to confirm the results or controvert the results, and that is for both parties to do. And then once they both agree that this person is currently not competent to stand trial at this time, the judge will sign a final observation order, and then that person will be taken to one of the mental health facilities and will stay there until they're able to what's called, I can't recall the exact name, but basically that they're now competent to stand trial, and then the case will come back and continue as if nothing had happened.
Here at Law&Crime, I can't help but think about the victims. Elizabeth Gerling, she was a mother to one, and she, by all accounts, was beloved within the community, especially as a principal where she had worked prior to her death. What are your thoughts about just the justice aspect in this types of case? Like, what does justice, in your opinion, look like in this particular case?
That is always the hardest question because you just don't know exactly what the community, what her her son feels about the case. Some people take death in various ways. Some people use the death of their family members to advocate for better laws. Some people use the death to, get more education about how we might have gotten here, right? We don't know the story of Mr. Hirsch yet, and to figure out what, I think people always want to know what could have been done better. Could the police response from him the night before have been better to prevent this? I think, unfortunately, family members and loved ones go through a long series of questions. And so I'll always leave it up to them to kind of guide what justice looks like. But I wouldn't be surprised if justice looks like for him that if it is true that this man murdered their loved one in such a brutal way that he will spend the rest of his life in jail.
All right, Danielle, thank you so much for your insight. Before we sign you off, is there anything else about this case you would like to add?
I think it's, just extremely, extremely sad. And I am very curious to know a little bit more about how police encountered him those hours earlier and whether or not that will make them change anything about their policies.
All right, Danielle, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Jeremy Kirch's attorney requested he undergo a psychiatric evaluation. A judge did grant that order. Kirch is expected to be back in court again on November 6th. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.